Formal welcome to this morning's Wellbeing at Home event. Of course, we're doing it at a slightly different time because the lovely Karina is in Thailand, so 5 p.m. would be quite late for her. We wouldn't want to have her join us at midnight Thai time.
Would be
yeah. Yeah. But thank you for joining us this morning. As I say every week, it's very heartwarming to see your familiar names and faces. If you haven't been with us before, welcome for the first time. So we do these events. We started them in lockdown, but we do these events quite often. I was going to say every week. It's not quite every week now, but it's fairly regularly. So that we can keep you on your well-being journey, so to speak, whilst you're at home. So not only when you're traveling, but just to keep up those well-being vibes, and also to help empower you with lots of information and tools and techniques and great inspirational talks with some wonderful experts that we have. So you have lots of information, really, so you can make your own decisions and empower yourself to try and lead a healthy and happy life when you're at home as well as when you go away. So today it's actually quite a relevant topic, certainly for me, because I feel like I'm sure everyone's been through quite a difficult time over the last 18 months. But this week, it was like really, for me, it felt like I had stepped back into a pre-pandemic world in terms of just the busyness of my life. And it was quite an interesting feeling because it's almost like you can forget where you were over the last 18 months, just from being in that moment of being really busy and hectic. And I had to just take a breath and say, you know what, let's just give a nod to what's happened here over the last 18. Let's not ignore this, because it has been, it's been life-changing on many levels, some good, some bad, on many levels, but I think it's affected us, it's affected everybody differently. And so when we were planning the session with Karina, and Karina was talking about revitalizing and vitality, and she said the word vitality, and it really resonated with me, and I just wrote it down and I said, that's it, we have to talk about vitality, because I feel like the pandemic has kind of sucked our vitality away, and now we're forced to go back into a busy life, so to speak, but maybe without those reserves that we have, like the energy reserves. So it's just like going from being quite depleted back into busyness. So anyway, that word really resonated with me, and I said to Karina, let's call it this, and she was like, yes, that's perfect, because it was exactly, she said, absolutely, that's exactly what we need to talk about, because that's what she's working on right now, a plan to regain our vitality at Kamalaya. So those of you who don't know Karina and Kamalaya, I'll just do a quick introduction. Karina is the co-founder with her husband John of the multi-award winning Kamalaya Wellness Sanctuary in Koh Samui in Thailand, and they've been going for 15 years now. I think the same amount of time as we've been going, and they have provided an amazing experience, life-changing experience for so many people over the years, and they're still winning awards. There was one that was publicized this week. I was like, wow, another award. But they are an incredible healing place. And Karina, welcome, and thank you for being here with us today. And I was just telling Karina, people are actually starting to book back. Like this week, we've had a really busy Kamalaya week. So people are, who have been before are very interested in going back, but also people who haven't been before are booking to go. So We know Thailand has opened their borders now for people to come. And we're delighted, of course, as Wellbeing Escapes, we're delighted about that. I'm sure you are too. So we're happy to be able to send people back to you, and so you can give them your magic. Anyway, thanks for being here with us, Karina. Nice to see you,
Stella. Really nice to see you. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me back. And it's beautiful to see so many people listening in and joining. That's wonderful. Really lovely to see you too.
Yeah. So last time you were on, we had talked a bit about some of the challenges that you have personally been through during this period. I mean, everyone's got their own story, of course.
Yes.
But I just catch us up, because at the time your mum, you had tried to get into Thailand, and then you had been turned away, and then you had to go all the way back to the States, and it was just, it was incredibly difficult for you. And of course, all the challenges of running a retreat during a period of, when nobody could travel, even though you were still open for the Thai people. Where are you today? What's happened since then?
So I'll go back in time to when I actually was able to come back to Thailand, and I'll do it rather quickly, but it'll kind of set the stage for where we are now. When I finally was able to return to Thailand to join my husband and bring my mother to live permanently with us, was October of 2020. And I went through a full 2-week quarantine, which was a fascinating experience. I think some people handled it better than most. I handled it quite well, but I am sure my husband, John, would not have. So I was happy he didn't have to go through that experience. And then from November onwards, I have been at Kamalai except for this summer, and I'll explain in detail. And what I noticed when I got back is that, we were very focused on, we have to stay open. We have to protect the team. We have to, basically the crisis was still ongoing. Thailand was closed. I was allowed to come back because I'm a resident, but basically Thailand for international guests was still closed until actually very recently. And pretty much 98% of our visitors and guests have been foreigners. So it hit us really hard. So we focused on really creating a domestic market, which I'm happy and so proud to say has developed, and our guests domestically are international as well as nationals, and they're just as beautiful and interested in what we're doing, and just the same ecosystem, I want to say, the same community. So Kamalai has a very strong genetic imprint, let's say, because we drew now within Thailand the same type of guests, which is beautiful. But then Christmas time was the first outbreak, 2020. It was small, but we didn't know it was going to be small, and the government didn't know it was going to be small. So right as we had reached, we were going to be, I think, 60% occupied for Christmas, New Year's, busy, occupancy. Right then, there was this little outbreak, which we didn't know would be little, and they shut everything down. And so we had all these cancellations. So it was like you're just getting on your feet, and then you get knocked down again, like a boxing match. You just get knocked out again. And my husband and I were so devastated. We actually literally just left for 5 days. It decimated us. And we had a GM, of course, in charge, and our wellness director. And we got back, caught our breath, came back and said, we'll get through this. January, the whole country was closed. February got momentum again and things opened up. And we said, great, Songkran, the next great holiday. And there was the big outbreak, which is still not totally quelched, but it's just in very remote areas. But in Samui, there's nothing. Phuket is nothing. That's why they're allowing the travel into these areas. And then again, all our bookings canceled. We had picked up momentum again. And so it was at that point that I think my personality changed dramatically. And I say that tongue in cheek, but really, I've never been in a boxing match, but I really felt like, what's going on? This is too much. And I think my husband was the one who noticed something's really off. And the way it manifested for me is I hadn't slept for months and months, so that continued. But I'm used to that. I'm at that age where, hormones are changing, your sleep is not so good. So I didn't pay too much attention, even though I'm a practitioner, I just soldiered on. But my actual personality changed. What I mean by that is I became much more irritable, and much more aggressive. Now, I wasn't breaking or throwing things, but that Stella knows me, and that's not my general temperament. I think psychologically I would test very high on agreeableness, and quite the opposite. I tend to be a pleaser. So at a certain point, my husband said, "Why don't you check into Kamalaya? We really, you know," and I said, "No, I don't want to burden the team. Everyone's so stressed." He said, "You really should check into Kamalaya. I think you really need it." And so I did. And that was the beginning of a huge another level of understanding, not only myself and my journey, but what millions and millions of people are going through, because it was, I mean, it's so overused. It was life-changing, but it really was life-changing. I did not realize the state of shock and trauma, cumulative, I was in. That's the thumbnail.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting. It's a very fascinating conversation. And during this period, people have been in all different positions. So some people have had, you know, economic challenges. You know, people in our industry, of course, have had those challenges. Some people have been busier than ever at work, but, you know, for whatever reason, but being stuck at home and isolated and feeling under pressure. It's been different for everybody. But what I've seen is that I've seen kind of two ways of handling it. And I'm really generalizing here. So please, whoever's on here, forgive me if I don't come from where you are. But this is a big generalization. But I've seen, like, the people who have become, you know, who became quite anxious and really felt that within them, and felt the repercussions of the anxiety of the situation they were in. And then there were the people who just fought through it, who soldiered through it, and and I put myself in the same bracket as you there, who could become a little bit irritated, could be aggressive, could be, you know, because we were just frustrated, because we felt like we kept being knocked down, you know. And then you also start to question the narrative and everything else, you know, everything that comes from that. So in a way, I believe the people who feel the anxiety, at least they know where they are, you know. But sometimes the people who don't feel that and are just pushing through, and that tends to be more like that A-type person who just pushes through. It's in a way, it's like a subconscious denial, isn't it, to what is really going on with you. I mean, luckily your husband said to you, you know, John said to you, go deal with it. But not everybody is told that. So yeah, I mean, no, how would you even recognize that? How would you even, if John hadn't said anything to you, how would you recognize that?
Well, all my therapists were telling me that my body really had a degree of tension they had never seen me even at my worst. So they were very gentle, as the Thais are, and they're very loving, and they were in no way being judgmental. They were actually quite concerned, because I do believe the stress level had made my body very acidic. So everything was very hard. They can feel, they're fabulous healers. So through touch, they can read your body, my body, and they were reading my body and helping me. So I knew that to be true on that level. And I thought, they're so sweet, you know, it's just a lack of sleep. I just didn't take it seriously. I have to say, I'm not suggesting it's not the A-type personality, but I would say it's the people who are in roles where a lot of people depend on you, and that if you were to stay in bed and cry for a month, a lot of bad things would happen. You don't have that luxury. So that could be the mother or the father of a family. It can be the CEO or owner of a company. It could be, you know, it's the person that a lot of others depend on. I think that for me was that sense of responsibility, and there is not that option of stopping at this moment. And it's like, I will take care of myself, and this later, we're in a crisis right now. It's like firefighting, right? So, but I also didn't realize that it was that severe. So it was when John insisted, and he really had to say it maybe 5 or 6 times. And the beautiful thing about John, for those of you who don't know him, but I know Stella knows this about John, is he's very gentle in his pushing. I mean, I often don't feel pushed until later. I realize, oh my God, he really was very insistent about this, but he does it so softly. He was the youngest in his family and he had 3 older sisters. I think he learned how to manage women. So it was a gentle insistence, but nonetheless, he persevered. Now, what I want to say is I think what was surprising, and maybe some of you can relate to this, and I hope you can, and if not for yourselves, maybe for those you are close to at home, your friends, your colleagues, the degree of stress, I believe, is actually already well into the realm of trauma that we have all gone through. And the thing with trauma is that not everybody responds in the same way to trauma. All of our previous history will determine how well we're able to respond and be resilient to trauma when it happens. So stress and trauma are different by degree and by definition. Stress is much milder on the scale, as we all know, than trauma. And I'm not going to call it PTSD formally because there are very formal definitions for that. But let's just say we definitely are in the realm of trauma because of the longevity of the uncertainty, not to mention the very specific ways in which we have each been affected. Some people have lost loved ones. Some people have lost the ability to stay connected. I have heard a lot of people that their social network is decimated. Everyone talks about how social, the technology has allowed that, but the fact is with trauma, many people want to hide. I couldn't reach out. I didn't have any more resources. So fortunately, I'm in a big village in Kamalaya, and on a small tropical island, but really still even then, my network of friends around the world, we all kind of pulled in, like a little bit like ostriches, pulling in. So everyone just responds differently. So social support, the loved ones, finances, as Stella, you mentioned, businesses and finances, our own health, depending on where we started off before the pandemic. So I definitely would say that most of us, the majority of us, have been in a state of trauma now for quite some time. And humans are not designed to live with prolonged uncertainty. That's why we create situations for stability, for predictability, to plan, to ameliorate or mitigate uncertainty. We're not wired for this. We're not, we've evolved to push that out to as far out to the edges as possible. And all of a sudden, the uncertainty came, and it has continued and continued and continued. And so I do believe trauma is what has happened to the majority of us to some degree or another. As I said, our histories attenuate that or enhance that. And what I mean by that is if we had a history already, let's say, of anxiety or of depression or of panic attacks and panic disorder. I mean, there are many, many things that directly impact sleep disorders. I mean, my sleep was definitely touch and go, but never like this. And then that was hugely impacted, which didn't help at all. So our histories have a big impact. And the other thing is, what was our childhood like insofar as were we dominated by very overbearing parents, in which case this lockdown situation is going to activate all those I had very strong parents. So for me, part of my fighting was how I felt as a little kid, like, no, I don't want to take this shot. Literally, we lived in the very remote parts of Mexico. So my mother had to buy, the vaccines for children and give them to us, and they'd have to hold me down. And I just could feel that same feeling of, no, I don't want to be locked down. This is crazy. And of course, it all gets played out while we're going through this uncertainty. So please be gentle on yourselves. I think if I were to talk to myself now, I would say, Karina, you're not letting yourself be gentle and kind, given, like, to acknowledge what you're going through right now.
It's really interesting, the word trauma, because people either really understand and say, okay, this has been a traumatic time for me, but a lot of people resist that word because they attach the word of trauma to something horrendous, like something like a one-time event that was really horrendous. And so I feel that we can use the word trauma, and I like the way that you said it can be it's a lack of certainty. It's an ongoing uncertain situation that can bring about traumatic events. But it's almost like that drip effect on us, which can result in trauma rather than one. Because the word trauma, people think of, an accident or a sudden death or a horrible divorce or, whatever it may be, one-time event, and then they attach trauma to that. But I think I really like the way you describe that, because it is the drip of trauma. And please, everybody, feel free to put questions, comments in chat. Let's make it interactive if you want to, of course. So thank you for stating that, Karina, because I think a lot of us, including myself, didn't want to accept that it had been traumatic, because I'm the one who looks after everyone and I'm the strong one, and everyone relies on me. So it's almost like I didn't want to accept that I had been through a traumatic period. And I think there's a lot of people who feel that way. And so, as you say, be kind and gentle, recognize that it has been traumatic and that you do need to nourish yourself and look after yourself. We'll come to that, how to do that. Let's move to the physical part, because, I think the whole, I understand why the lockdowns happen. I think the repercussions of the lockdowns have been immense, and they will continue to show themselves over the years. But one of the things I found quite interesting at the beginning of lockdown, and I was personally questioning, I was like, why are you stopping people exercising? You're only allowed out once a day or whatever. It's like, it doesn't matter where you were around the world, but it was just like these ridiculous responses to exercise, like, being outside and exercising. So, but I don't know one person who has been through this period who hasn't had physical issues around it. So either putting on weight, getting unfit. I certainly saw it with myself, comfort eating. I know friends who were baking every day, because I think baking became a very comforting kind of pastime. So there, we all moved to the things that made us feel comfortable. So, comfort eating food, for me, it was sugar overload at the time. I was eating too much sugar, and then then there were repercussions from that. But, baking, alcohol, a lot of people turn to alcohol as a way to either, dull the pain or relieve the boredom or whatever it was. But most people have come out of this, and I know from the phone calls that we're getting, Wellbeing Escapes right now, people are saying, oh, I need to just either shift the weight that I've put on, I need to feel more alive, because I feel sluggish. A lot of people are feeling sluggish. So what have you seen the same thing? Has everyone seen the same thing? Have you all had that same, was it just me overloading on the sugar?
No, I think we all have, we regress when we're challenged beyond our capacity to respond as adults. We go into little baby regressions all the time, right? So then we go to the behavior that we've used before that was helpful or not helpful, but it at least alleviated the feeling of being out of control. You want to self-soothe. Some people, as we know very well, have turned to alcohol. Some people have, addictions have escalated. I personally, this is aside from the health issues, which I don't want to touch on these lockdowns, but what I will say is not allowing people to be outside to connect with nature had huge consequences. Nature is one of our greatest healers. Forget the exercise component, because really, you have to be very disciplined, but you can develop an exercise routine at home, and with all the apps and all the YouTubes. There was so much online stuff. I was not one of those participants that was disciplined indoors, by the way. Stella, I'm right there with you. I developed so many cookie recipes that we now have a cookie at Kamalaya called Karina's grain-free, gluten-free cookie.
At least it's grain-free and gluten-free.
Wildly popular. I'm not kidding you. It went international. Somebody asked me for the recipe, interviewed me on a thing, and said what was one of the things. And That was one of the things, you know. So when I'll send you, no, I don't think I can ship it to you, Stella, because they're very fresh. But
Send me
anyway,
the recipe. Yeah.
but the thing is that we all, our connection to nature, and this is true at Kamalaya, you know that, Stella, and any of you who have seen the photos, we created an environment where you really, your senses are really in touch with nature, the sounds and the smells and the textures, and you can almost taste the tropical fauna and flora. And when we locked down the way we did, the disconnection from nature has had profound consequences. And so I really encourage all of us, myself and everyone I know, spend time in nature. It's the biggest healer. You know, spend time in nature. Put your feet on the grass, on the earth, on the sand. I do it on the sand at Kamalaya. You know, luckily, because of being on Koh Samui, that section of this for me was not difficult. But when I was in the States initially in Arizona, it was also the same as in the UK. So I think it's recognizing that we each are going to revert to what we know. None of us has faced this before. None of us. I actually traveled in it, and it felt like I was either that there was a war and everyone was in their bunkers, and what the hell was I doing flying around the world through empty airports 3 times internationally? And then, or I felt like I had landed on another planet that simulated ours, but wasn't ours. It was so surreal. And really it wasn't until I immersed myself to try to get my nervous system to readjust, to come out of a state of trauma, that I realized in what a state I was in. That's the irony. It wasn't till I was thawing out the freeze response in some parts of me that I realized, wow. And my response as a child wasn't anger, was freeze. I think I got into the anger when my system was overloaded. I just couldn't freeze anymore. But I think that if each of us can just, when we look at what has happened, can be kind. Like, okay, I gained 10 kilos. You know, I'm a wellness professional. I'm a Chinese medical doctor. I'm a teacher of yoga, meditation. I mean, no one is more in this world, I think, than I am. I was raised in it. It's like my DNA. I put on 10 kilos. Now, is it that I ate that many gluten-free cookies that I was experimenting? No, it's the stress. Yes, it's some of the habits weren't there that like before, but it was really, I am certain my cortisol levels went through the roof, because a lot of it, yeah, some is nice on my breast and my bum, but most is on my belly, and that's not so nice. That's stress. So be kind. And I'm saying it to you because it's my journey too. Truly, it's my journey. As really, I wasn't there a few months ago.
Yeah, so it's that being gentle and kind on yourself around that. I think that it's going back to that, as you say, the stress and the cortisol levels, that fight or flight, that feeling of survival, like how am I going to survive through this? And so with the adrenal response and everything else, and so that fight or flight response was that, even though it wasn't as obvious, I mean, I still feel it within myself too, and I know what happens. You know, I really try and switch off the media as much as I can, because it's so fear-inducing. I mean, even now, where they've, you know, vaccinated large parts of the world, there's still this like fear-inducing headlines, constant. It's just constant on every level, on everything. And so it really, and I it's almost like I look at it and I observe myself having the reaction, because now I can kind of step back and observe. I find it quite interesting to see that, like that observation. It's just a fascinating subject, because it's like everything that's thrown at us is to push that fight or flight response. I'll say everything, but a lot of the coverage is to push that fight or flight response. So it is interesting. There's some nice comments in here. What do we have? Let's just read them out. Spending a lot more time outside. Yeah, that's great. Be outside, always the case. It's only the luck and privilege. Yeah, Lisa, you're absolutely right. but we should still honor that. We should still honor that we've been through it. I don't think because others haven't, you know, that we are more first world and privileged, but we should honor our trauma. Yeah, thank you, Julie, about the media. Joe Wicks, yes, he's a hero. Lots of yeah, nice to look at. Anyway, we're going into that. Yeah, and the uncertainty that persists. I think let's switch the conversation. I think we've kind of understood what we've all been through, and we've identified the trauma and everything else. Let's switch to what we can do now to come out of this situation and regain our vitality, because, you know, as Hilary says, the uncertainty persists, and the uncertainty will persist, and it will continue to persist for a while. And I think if personally, I believe even if it's not the uncertainty about this, it will be another subject. The uncertainty will persist, and we'll be hit with these messages continuously. So we have to find a way to deal with them, to empower ourselves and not be it's fear. For me personally, it's about fear. You know, it's about kind of overcoming that constant like fight or flight, which comes from a state of fear. So it's, you know, overcoming that. But let's talk about your roadmap, because you're looking to build, or you have done. I'm not really sure. Where are you with that?
I think it'll be finished by this month, and then we'll share it with all our partners. I tried for end of October, but there was just too much going on, you know, with the opening and many things that are wonderful happening. But I think by the end of November, Gopal also took a holiday, my wellness director, so it was hard for me to finish up things with him together. Well, I want to say that Sujay said this, I think, in one of his discussions with you, and he really broadcast this message. And I think one of the places to start with, well, let me backtrack. The number one, two things that I think are pivotal, that are critical to start anything, it's like the foundation, is time in nature and getting sleep right. And I think there are lots and lots of tips from sleep experts. I'm sure you've spoken to some yourself, Stella, here. But basically having a sleep routine and doing everything necessary to get your sleep right, those two things are like the foundations. The food and all of that to me is secondary. The fitness comes soon after, but let's just start with those two things, right? From there, I would say developing a very strong routine that you really are honest with yourself and have a look, and then dedicating some time. You can call it your reinvigorating time, revitalizing time, where you're going to put all the different things through the week in little chunks of time. Because I think without setting up a structure, once we've moved into this chronic stress or this trauma state, again, it's by degree for each person. I don't want to assume that everyone is the same. For some people, it might be very light and got very little disruption. I'm seeing from our guests arriving internationally, in their eyes, from our guests after all the lockdowns coming from Bangkok, in their eyes, that they are in trauma. I can see it. I'm a doctor. I'm trained to be able to see this, and it shocked me. I didn't expect it. So that's why I think Stella and I started talking about this the last time, and that's why we decided to do this. So the structure of the day really helps. And some of you are very good at this, but I know people who were good in their routines, whose routines got thrown off completely. So even with those who were good. And Sujay talked about that. And I remember thinking, oh, that's really interesting. But so that would be the next layer. The being gentle and kind means don't try to fight off too much right off the bat. So when I went through the program I created in May, week 1 was a small piece. Week 2, I added more, and week 3 went the deepest. And I never do things like that. I never am gradual. I'm not like, let me go at it all the way. The more intense, the better. I love to be challenged that way. I was surprised that I had to do it that way. I tried to do it the other way. I fell flat on my face. So I would suggest the same. As you look at your routine, let's say for the month, You say, I'm going to really start now trying to address the stress and trauma. When are you going to spend time outdoors? Maybe that's already part of your routine. Maybe it's not. Block that in. How am I going to do my sleep routine? I now go to bed at 8:30. It doesn't mean I'm asleep, but I'm in my bedroom in pajamas at 8:30. My husband was really hard to get on board with this, but it's one of the things I had to do. I might not fall asleep till 10, but I give my body the opportunity, right? Rather than fighting through it and saying, no, I'm going to go to bed at 9:30 or 10. And surprisingly, a large number of times I'm asleep by 9. Now I wake up at 4. I have chanting and meditation and prayers, and that's like a big morning that I have for all of that. That's my routine. But until I blocked in when I was going to be in bed, I wasn't getting it. My sleep has regulated completely. I'm proud to say, as of about 2 weeks ago. So that's huge for me. But I had to be disciplined about that piece. Whatever it is for you, be realistic and start with one thing at a time. These are very simple things, but I'm telling you, our minds are not working in that systematic way. So choose one of the ones that I have mentioned are so critical. Now, the biggest thing I would say from a practice point of view to address trauma is breathing. Specific breathing practices. I don't know, Stella, if you've had.
Yeah, we've had Jordan. In fact, we've done a course on breath work. Jordan's an amazing breath work practitioner.
Okay. Fantastic.
In fact, we can ask him to come back and do another
And
session.
I was going to say, Suje, our mentors, all are deeply practiced and can train and can come on, Stella, to do a small session, a mini session on breath to release trauma. It's something we offer at Kamalaya. It's definitely part of this. The program is called Igniting Change, for those of you who later are interested. And it can be a 1 week, a 2 week, or a 3 week, because not everyone can obviously come for such a long time. But it's designed to stand alone or to build, right? And breath is the most critical part. And there are apps for it. There are one-on-ones. Now we've launched also Kamalaya Connect, and we can do one-on-ones with our breath practitioners, our mentors. Stella, you've had someone on, so you know also of some people. I just advocate you work with someone who's really well trained. It's, that has the knowledge and the training, because it's the most powerful tool to rebalance the central nervous system, the autonomic nervous system. And it powerfully gets the vagus nerve to get re-engaged and activated, which is the healing response. Instead of fight, or freeze, you move to heal and digest mode in the nervous system. So that's the most powerful. If we're talking about what can we do, that would be it.
But sleep and breath is the foundation of everything, is what you're saying. Sleep and breath. So,
and nature. And nature.
Yeah, and nature. So every day spend time in nature, even if it's like a 20-minute walk in the park or wherever you are. Go and stand in your garden. If you don't have a garden, go to the park. Take your I do this. Oh, my family despair of me, but I just don't care. The age where I just don't care. Where you take your socks off and you actually stand on the ground to connect with the earth. I do that a lot. But if you don't want to be crazy like me and do that, that's okay. Just be in nature. Have your sleep. I think sleep is the one that is the most challenging for many, because it's having that sleep routine where exactly, as you do 8:30, for some people it could be 9:30, whatever, but it's just making sure it's a routine that you do all the time and that you follow. Okay, so that's really important. And then the breath work. The breath work, I've got to say, has been my personal savior throughout this time. I use breath work a lot to help me. And it's interesting, when you do the breath work, you actually feel parts of your body release. I took up Kundalini yoga during this time too, which really has a lot of breath work. In fact, we had a class last week with Colin. If people haven't had a chance to watch the recording, because he talks a lot about the autonomic nervous system, and through the breath, and Kundalini yoga uses a lot of breath work too. So Thank you. And I will take you up on your offer. We'll have CJ or someone else come on and do
Yes,
some
yes.
more breath work for us. That'd be great. So
I want to hold on, Stella. Just before you go on, I just wanted to very quickly. We have another mentor joining us from the same training, the same background, and it would be lovely because it would be a great way to introduce him to you and to the team. And he's joining us, I think, at the end of November. He'll be with us, and he has exactly the same background and is equally lovely. But what I also wanted to add to that, in addition to that, and importantly, is a reduction in caffeine intake. And if you're going to continue to, coffee is the strongest caffeine hit we have that's legal. And I think that we need to recognize that it's a jolt. It's like literally like taking electricity and jolting ourselves awake. And what it does to the adrenals, what it does to the hypopituitary adrenal axis, the HPA axis, what it does to the nervous system. It's if you want to move out of stress response into healing response, you have to work with your coffee intake. And one of the things is if you really love your coffee, take it after breakfast. Take something much softer, much milder, a black tea that's not strong, more Asian style where it steeps for a minute and that's it. And then you can reuse that same amount of tea, is a gentler way if you absolutely need the caffeine. And it's okay if you need to, but do it a milder version and save the coffee for after food. And that I really have to say, because it's not likely you will be able to heal the nervous system and switch if you continue with a strong coffee, high caffeine consumption. That's just really important. Otherwise, they're working at odds with each other.
That's really interesting. Okay, so we cut out the coffee and to have it after food rather than as a morning, the first drink of the day. Okay. And okay, so that's great. So those four things, we've got 4 things now, are your foundation. And this is what you do when you're, if you come on your week 1 at Camellia. Obviously, you have all the lovely treatments and everything else included in all of that. But that is the fundamental basic of the basis.
Well, we have treatments. There's much more. I just can't show you. There are exercises that actually activate and heal the vagus nerve and that whole system. We have therapies like this ancient Chinese style of massage called Chinetsan on the abdomen, which was core to me. I mean, I could feel the before and after. It was unbelievable. And it's designed also to release trauma and to release, and people, it's quite an intense treatment. I remember.
Well, I've got to say, when I came to Camellia and I had the Chinetsan, it totally released everything. I couldn't, I mean, it was,
Right.
It didn't feel great initially with the release, because it was just, it hit me with things that I had buried for many years, but it's interesting. There's a question here from Hillary. Does splashing our face with cold water help when you get up? Good for the vagus nerve?
I think that's a really wonderful way to wake up instead of coffee, quite frankly. It's definitely going to be stimulating. I've never checked what it does for the vagus nerve, but for sure it's stimulating. You can try it and see. I would rather be stimulated with the cold water than with a strong cup of coffee, for sure. I'm sure it's not going to do the damage.
Yeah. So the first week is about balancing the nervous system. Okay. Yeah.
It doesn't. No. Let me. No.
Okay.
The first week includes things that balance the nervous system, but it also includes things that really reduce the inflammation. Because when your nervous system is fight or flight, if you don't reduce the inflammation, that's really difficult to heal. So it's a 2-pronged approach. You start reducing the inflammation, which starts affecting also the nervous system, and vice versa. You start calming the nervous system and you reduce the inflammation. So, but week one, this is the way the progression goes. Week 1 moves from a more physical orientation, the body, more physically oriented. The second week becomes a little bit more towards the emotional releasing. For example, we also use acupuncture, which is powerful in releasing neurotransmitters, Also releasing emotions. I remember when I was a student and working with a man, a very, prominent businessman, and I put a couple of needles that would open the lungs because he had some lung pathology. And oh my God, he started weeping. And I was shocked. I didn't know, I was a student. So it was like, oh, and, and the teacher said, no, that's normal. That happens, people start releasing. So things like acupuncture, we start including as well. Then week 2 is a lot of the emotional letting go, which happens all the time, but we focus more on it and amplify that and move away from such a strong focus on just the body. And then by the 3rd week, we're going deeply into the mind and the consciousness and awareness. So it becomes more and more subtle, less body, and then emotional, and then mental. And so it becomes more subtle, but all along dealing with the trauma, but from different angles, right? That's what we do at Malaya. We have many angles for the same end goal.
Yeah. So, Camellia is so much more than a beautiful retreat in nature. I mean, all these programs are very, very clearly and comprehensively thought out, as Karina said. Well, you've got the person who creates them, so that's good. But
can I just say this? So week 1, just to clarify, you would, for example, be doing some cardio to circulate and get some of that acidity down and some of that inflammation, but you wouldn't be doing like weight training, but the physical moving of things, igniting the metabolism.
Yeah. So if you can't come to Camellia at this point in time, but you need to do something like that. So we've talked about the basics, the sleep, the nature, the coffee, the breath work. What else would you recommend that people do
I would say
in their day-to-day lives to help themselves release that trauma?
Yeah, so I would add something physical.
Okay.
Now, some people like the hula hoop. Great. Do 20 minutes of the hula hoop a day. Some people like jogging. Do the jogging. Some people like Kundalini yoga. I've also done it and love it. Do Kundalini yoga. You like hiking, go hiking. Whatever it is that you like, that you enjoy, it should not be a chore. It should not feel punishing. It should feel like, oh, I can't wait to go and do that hula hoop, or I can't wait and put on my rollerblades, or I can't wait to get on my bicycle and go in the park. Do what you love and do it every day. Short. It's like giving yourself a couple of cookies, right? You should enjoy it and look forward to it, but it has to be physical, something physical, and you can build on that. And the second thing I would say is, if you can, try to take some supplements. I wanted to give a few supplements or teas that will help rebalance. So this is now being actively at home. We do it at Kamalaya through the foods and so forth, but that's a bigger chore to do at home. We have very specific cuisines that are anti-inflammatory, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the supplements that I really believe for stress is critical, 2 actually, are the B complex and magnesium. So if you're not already taking them, those are really, really essential at this time. And they're just, you can do it through diet or you can do it through supplementation. Another one that I find, it's in my repertoire, I travel with it. I prefer to take it as a tea, but you can also find it as a bottle. You can either get mulberry leaf tea, which is high in GABA, G-A-B-A, or you can just buy the supplement, GABA. It's GABA amino butyric acid, which is naturally produced in the body. It's a neurotransmitter. It has a calming effect on the nervous system. So I like to drink it as a tea because it's more whole with all the other antioxidants. But
can we just write that in chat? What was it?
Sure. So mulberry,
please. You've brought me that before. I love it. It's amazing. Magnesium. I take magnesium citrate.
Yeah, and glycinate. Both are good. Glycinate is also. Yeah. I was just going to answer that.
Magnesium citrate. And what's the other one? Glycinate. Okay, yeah, perfect.
Glycinate.
So, sorry. Yeah, because I agree. There's so when I went to look at the magnesium, there was so many. You have to really research to find the right one. Okay, that's really good advice. And the B complex too is is one that you recommend during this, like, times of trauma and stress, and
Yes. Yes.
again, that and what effect does B complex have? It just
Our
regulates.
nervous system, and women more than men,
Mhm.
the neurotransmitters, the whole nervous system uses a lot of B. And so when we're under stress, regular stress, we need to take it. Under these conditions, we need it even more. So, and women tend to need more Bs than men as well.
Yeah.
That's why we get bitten by mosquitoes more than men typically.
Interesting. Okay, so that's really, I mean, there's a lot of great advice there around around what we can do at home. How about on more kind of the emotional level?
So on the emotional level, I would say nurture a couple of close relationships. If you're in a relationship, spend a little more quality time with your partner. I mean, John and I are really working on that because of this crisis, both being in the same business together. You know, it's like we were lost. And I just had a phone call with him today. I said, honey, we need to take a few days off. We need to like regroup because, you know, we need that. And it's time and it's necessary. So reach out. Don't be afraid to talk vulnerably, to share vulnerably, to listen lovingly and kindly, not giving advice, just listening to someone, being there for someone, just presence, and find the person or two or three who really, really can do that for you. And remember, you're not asking someone to fix your problems. It's about having someone who you can feel safe enough with to be truly vulnerable and share your thoughts, your worries, your pain, and hold each other's hands. You know, of course we share the good things also. That's like a given, right? That's not difficult. But do you have someone? And if you don't have some, try to develop that. I told that to my sister, who's been in such a state of change and growth herself that she really can't relate to her previous friends who were very, let's just say, very light and fluffy. And she woke up to that now. And she's a wonderful, wonderful person. And I said, look, you can keep those friendships, but you need to find some new friends, one or two, you don't need a lot, but that are really meaningful, where you can share deeply and vulnerably. And so we all need that. And I think for the emotional component, that's very important. And I think some people are better at it than others. You might be someone, whoever one of you, that's not an issue, then great, you're fortunate. A lot of people have felt this part of their life affected, and we can be proactive. And if not, you can find a counselor who can help with that. Like some people go in a shell. I used to be like that before Kamalaya, where I would go in a shell and it would take me a long time. And my sister's like that to come back out. So I'm helping her, but sometimes we need to find someone to help. And there's nothing wrong with that. We all need help sometimes. It doesn't mean we failed, we're not strong. It means we're human, you know, and our resources might be tapped out right now.
Yeah, and I would like to add to that, don't downplay your issues. I think especially women of a certain age, we've been taught to downplay our issues like they're not really that important. But it isn't that, you know, I think if something is troubling you, then it's worth talking about, full stop. You don't have to compare it to anyone else. You don't have to feel that you're worthy of having that conversation. And that it isn't a big problem. If it's a big problem for you, it's a problem. That's what I would just like to add to that, because I you know, it's something that we do tend to kind of go, oh, well, that's not really a big deal because so and so is going through this, you know. My friend's going through a really bad illness, you know, my problems are tiny compared to them. And that, you know, that's kind of a two-pronged situation, because on one hand you can feel gratitude, of course, for being in, you know, your own much healthier situation, for example, but then don't downplay your issues, because then I have found, I've seen it over and over, they just accumulate and then they blow up. Do you agree, Karina?
100%,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
It's really, you know, we're all unique and different, and just like we're genetically different, we're also emotionally unique and different. And some of us have more resilience than others. Some of us usually have more resilience, but at this moment don't have much, and or vice versa. We might right now be more resilient than we thought, and we can be there for others. But the main thing is we are really social beings. We really are. And what has happened with lockdowns and all of this, it has strained those relationships for some of us. Now, some of us not. Some people are stronger than ever. They set up family weekly Zooms where the whole family all over the world was connecting weekly and sharing meals. And I thought, wow, that's phenomenal. You know, that was not the case. I'm very connected with my family, but we're all on different time zones. So it's really hard to get us all together. So whatever the case may be, we are deeply social, and that needs to be nurtured just as much as every other part. I'm a big fan, I don't know how to say it, I'm a big fan of aromatherapy, and that really is helpful for emotional balance as well. These homeopathy, Bach flower remedies, aromatherapy, these essences, it's part of a whole field called vibrational medicine or energy medicine, and that also really is helpful on the emotional level.
We've covered those too. Thank you. We've had a lovely lady talk about flower essences. We've had an aromatherapy, so it's wonderful. Well, Lisa, thank you for that. No, I feel quite emotional reading that. You know, I think as Karina helps people through learning from herself, I do the same. So whatever tools I can bring in, and wonderful inspirational people like Karina to help you all, I will of course do that. Karina, thank you so much for your time, your just heartfelt advice. It's just so genuine and full of integrity, just like Caroline. Everything that you do is full of integrity, and I just thank you for that.
Thank you, Stella. Thank you for the opportunity to share what I'm.
Oh no, always. Yeah,
beautiful.
I know you always provide such great information for everyone who comes along, and we feel like we're chatting with a friend. It's just so, well, you are a friend, but for everybody else, I know they all feel like you're chatting with a friend. So thank you for being with us. Have a wonderful, it's Karina's birthday next week, so we'll wish her a happy birthday up front.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And wishing you a very happy birthday from the whole Wellbeing at Home community too.
Thank
you. Thank you all for being present again, for being with us, and have a wonderful week ahead. I'll be in touch about the next event on email like I usually do, and in the meantime, have a great weekend. Lots of love.
And to you all too, have a beautiful Saturday. You're just starting your weekend, so I hope you get some sunshine, and even if not, rain is beautiful too. So I wish you a gorgeous weekend ahead. Thank you so much.
Send us some Thai sunshine, please. Okay.
Got it.
Bye everyone. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Lots of love. Bye bye.
Bye bye.